Narrow hems, also called rolled hems, give a professional edge finish to any light to medium weight fabric. Even if you have a serger that does rolled hems, narrow hems sewn on the conventional machine are sturdier and have a more finished look. The narrow hem or feet are not difficult to use, but they do require practice to master, and various fabrics behave differently as they pass through the foot. Tightly woven natural fibers will roll more easily than loosely woven and synthetic fibers which resist manipulation. Fabrics ideal for the narrow hem or feet include broadcloth, quilting weight cotton, silk, tricot, and other lightweight knits, shirting and blouse weight fabrics, as well as lighter weight home decorating fabrics. Situations where narrow hems are suitable are scarves, napkins, ruffle edges, and lightweight shirt hems. Corners and cross seams can be sewn over, though the fabric has to be light enough to not create so much bulk that the hemmer cannot do its job. So as always, do a test first to see if your project is suitable for this finish. The narrow hem or feet generally come in 3 sizes, 2mm, 4mm, and 6mm, depending on the brand. The heavier the fabric, the wider the hem or foot you will need to use. Stitch length should be a suitable length for the fabric. Sewing narrow hems on the straight or cross grain is easiest, and you should practice on fabric cut on the straight or cross grain first, though slightly curved edges can be sewn, such as a gentle shirt tail hem. There are 2 methods for beginning to sew a narrow hem. When possible, it is easiest to sew the hems before any side seams are sewn, but you can also sew a narrow hem in the round by starting the hem midstream. The first method involves placing the fabric right side down under the presser foot and taking 4 or 5 stitches at the very edge in the hem allowance. Be sure to hold the thread tails when doing this, as the thread tails are what you will be using to feed the fabric into the foot. Next, lift the presser foot and bring the fabric slightly toward you, and then use the thread tails in your left hand to pull the fabric backward and into the scroll of the hemmer foot. Still holding the thread tails and the fabric, lower the presser foot. This is much easier to do if your machine has a knee lift. Continue holding the thread tails and begin sewing slowly, slightly tugging on the thread tails to get the fabric rolling through the foot and out the back. Another way to begin rolling the hem involves finger pressing along the hem once, then twice for a couple of inches at the start. Hold the thread tail securely and take several stitches into the folded hem. Stop sewing with the needle down and raise the presser foot, and pull the hem up into the scroll of the foot. Lower the foot and continue sewing. This method will be used when sewing hems along corners. The remainder of the sewing requires correct guiding of the fabric into the scroll on the foot. Too much fabric rolling into the foot will create a twisted hem. Too little fabric rolling in will cause the upper edge to not turn under. While sewing, guide the fabric carefully. Guide the raw edge of the fabric along the groove to the left of the scroll on the foot. This helps to not guide too much or too little fabric into the hem. Examine your sample and decide if any adjustments need to be made. It may be necessary to bring your needle position 1 notch to the left to bring the stitch closer to the hem fold. This may or may not need to be done depending on the fabric being used. To turn corners on napkins and scarves, it's easiest to do with the wider hemmer foot widths. Using the pre-press technique shown earlier, sew the first hem edge. Before proceeding to sew the second, third, and fourth edges, take the time to clip off any uneven hem endings at the end of the hem so that you will have a nice clean edge to start the next side with. Continue using this method for all edges. Shell edges can easily be sewn on very lightweight wovens, but work especially well on tricot knit fabrics. Sew the hems as shown before, but select a picot edge stitch or a simple overlock stitch and adjust the width to wide and the length to a longer setting. If your machine does not have these stitches, use a blind hem stitch and mirror image the stitch and adjust the stitch width and length. A wide stitch width gives you a deeper scallop, and the stitch length is determined by how long of a scallop you want to have. So practice until you get the look that you want. The left straight stitches will go into the fabric, and the right swing of the stitch will go off the edge, curl the hem, and give you a decorative hem in one step. If you are having trouble getting the fabric to roll under properly, don't get frustrated. Try an alternative and use the zigzag stitch to hold the hem in place. When sewn in matching thread, it will look just as professional as the straight stitch and also be very sturdy. As any raw edges will be encased in the stitching, it won't matter if the fabric did not roll properly. Some stiffer fabrics that resist creasing are better sewn with this method. The narrow hemmer feet are great tools for making beautifully finished edges, and when you take the time to get to know how to use them properly, they will become one of your more commonly used accessories.